Ethan Cole was a man who built empires with silence. At 42, the billionaire CEO of Cole Global sat at the head of boardrooms that held their breath until he spoke. Every word from him carried the weight of markets, the kind of man who didn't just move stocks, he moved nations. His penthouse overlooked the city like a throne on a cliff. Glass walls, polished marble, a private elevator. Everything screamed power, but inside, the silence had grown heavier than his billions. It was late, too late for business calls. Past midnight, the city had dimmed into soft flickers of streetlights and the low hum of traffic. Ethan sat on his leather couch, his phone in his hand, staring at the screen. His contacts list blurred before his eyes. He wanted to call someone, anyone, but he had no one left he could call without hesitation. Not since Caroline, his ex-wife, had left him 3 years ago, walking out without slamming the door. She hadn't needed to. Her silence had been louder than any argument. His son, Mason, was gone too, living with her in another city, a teenage boy who looked more like him every year but barely answered his texts. Ethan's calls went ignored. He had missed birthdays, missed games, missed the little things until the little things turned into everything. That night, with a glass of untouched scotch sweating on the coffee table, Ethan decided to try again. Maybe Mason would pick up. Maybe Caroline would let him speak to his son. His fingers trembled, just slightly, as he scrolled to the number he thought was hers. He pressed call. The line rang once, twice, then a small voice answered. Hello. Ethan froze. The voice wasn't Caroline's. It wasn't Mason's either. It was a little girl. High-pitched, soft, like the sound of a bell muffled under a pillow. He frowned. Hello, who is this? There was a pause, then a giggle. You called me. Who are you? Ethan blinked, sitting up straighter. He glanced at the number. He must have hit a wrong digit. It wasn't Caroline's phone at all. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry. I must have dialed the wrong number. But before he could hang up, the girl whispered something that made his chest tighten. Are you lonely too? Ethan's breath caught. His hand hovered over the red button, but he didn't press it. What did you say? The girl repeated it, slower this time. Are you lonely too? 'Cause, that's okay. My mommy says sometimes people just need someone to talk to. Even if it's a stranger. Her innocence cracked something inside him, something he had locked away for years under steel and glass. He swallowed hard. Why would you think I'm lonely? Because you called, she said simply. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't speak. The little girl didn't sound scared. She didn't even ask his name. She just waited. Finally, he said, "What's your name?" "Lila," she chirped. "I'm 7. How old are you?" Ethan almost laughed, but the sound stuck in his throat. "I'm older. Much older." "That's okay," Lila said. "My daddy's old too, but he doesn't call me anymore." The words hit him like a punch to the ribs. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the phone pressed tight to his ear. "He doesn't?" he asked quietly. "Nope," she said. "He went away. Mommy says he's busy, but I don't think he wants to talk to me." Her voice wavered, just a little, before she added, "Sometimes I pretend he's gonna call. Just so I can say hi." Ethan's eyes burned. He hadn't cried in years, not even when Caroline left. But this child, this stranger, was peeling him open with every word. He forced his voice steady. "I'm sorry, Lila. That must hurt." "It's okay," she said, almost cheerfully. "Mommy says he still loves me, even if he doesn't call." "Do you have a little girl?" "No," Ethan whispered. "I have a son, but I haven't been a very good dad." There was silence on the other end. Then Lila said softly, "Maybe you should call him. Before it's too late." Ethan closed his eyes. That was it. That was the sentence that made him feel the sting behind his eyes and the ache in his chest. His hand trembled, and for the first time in years, Ethan Cole cried. Quietly, where no one could see. He wiped his face roughly, trying to pull himself back together. "You're very wise for 7, Lila." She giggled again. "That's what my teacher says. Mommy says I ask too many questions. Do you want to hear one?" "Sure," he said, his voice thick. "Why do grown-ups forget to be happy?" Ethan let out a shaky breath. He didn't know how to answer. Maybe we get too busy." "That's silly," Lila said. "I'm busy too. I have homework and piano. But I still like to laugh." Despite himself, Ethan smiled. "You're right, that is silly." They talked for a few more minutes, about nothing and everything, her favorite ice cream flavor, her stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers, the way she liked to draw stars on her notebooks. Each word was a thread pulling him closer to something he hadn't felt in years, connection. Finally, a woman's voice cut in. Lila, who are you talking to? There was a shuffle, and Lila whispered quickly, that's Mommy. I gotta go. Bye, lonely man. And then the line went dead. Ethan sat there, phone pressed to his ear long after the call ended, staring out at the city. He couldn't explain it, but that little girl's words clung to him like an echo. Maybe you should call him. Before it's too late. For the first time in years, Ethan felt afraid. Not of losing money, not of losing power, but of losing something he hadn't realized was already slipping through his fingers, his son. He picked up his glass of scotch and set it down without drinking. His reflection in the window looked foreign, tired, worn, vulnerable. He thought about Mason, about Caroline, about how many times he had chosen the next deal over the next memory. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Cole wondered if maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He tried, but every time he closed his eyes, he heard her voice again. Maybe you should call him. Before it's too late. It had been months since Mason picked up. His texts were usually left on read, if read at all. At 16, Mason had the same stubborn streak Ethan once had, the same streak that had pushed Ethan to build empires, but also to burn bridges without looking back. By morning, Ethan made a decision. He wasn't going to let that bridge turn to ash. But deciding was one thing. Doing was another. For 3 days, he sat in board meetings and dinners with investors, his mind only half in the room. Numbers and contracts blurred into background noise. He found himself staring at fathers walking with their kids in the park, at teenagers laughing with their friends outside coffee shops. He started noticing things he had ignored for years. The weight grew heavier until he couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, he shut down his laptop, turned off his phone to everyone except one number, and took a breath. Then he dialed his son. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. He braced himself for voicemail. But then, click. Yeah, Mason's voice. Flat, guarded. Ethan's chest tightened. Mason, it's me. A pause. Then, what do you want? Ethan had expected coldness, but hearing it still stung. I just wanted to hear your voice. Well, you heard it, Mason snapped. Bye. Wait, Ethan blurted before his son could hang up. Please, just give me a minute. Another pause. Then a sigh. Fine, 1 minute. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gripping the phone like a lifeline. I know I haven't been there. I know I've missed a lot. Too much. And I can't change that. But I want to do better. I want to try. If you'll let me. Silence. Then Mason's laugh, bitter and sharp. Now you want to try. After years of nothing. After birthdays and games and everything. Why now? Ethan's throat closed. He thought of Lila, her tiny voice telling him to call before it was too late. He swallowed. Because I was wrong. I thought building this company was the most important thing. But I was wrong. None of it matters if I lose you. For a moment, he thought Mason had hung up. Then his son said quietly, you don't even know what my favorite team is anymore. Ethan's eyes burned. You're right. I don't. But I want to. Tell me. There was a long silence. Then Mason muttered, Golden State. Ethan closed his eyes. Golden State. Got it. Maybe we could go to a game together. Just you and me. Don't make promises you won't keep, Mason said, his voice breaking for just a second before it hardened again. I won't, Ethan said firmly. Not this time. Before Mason could reply, another voice came through, Caroline's. Mason, dinner. Then, faintly, who are you on the phone with? Mason hesitated. No one, he said quickly. Just someone. And then the line went dead. Ethan sat there, phone in his hand, tears he didn't let fall blurring his vision. It wasn't much, but it wasn't nothing either. For the first time in years, there was a crack in the wall between them. The following week, Ethan tried again. This time he sent Mason a message. No business trips. No excuses. Name the day, and I'll be there. Hours passed. Then finally, Mason replied, Game Friday. Don't be late. Ethan stared at the text like it was a contract worth more than his entire company. He booked the tickets within minutes. Friday night, he stood outside the stadium, nerves gnawing at him. His driver offered to wait, but Ethan shook his head. He wanted to do this alone. When Mason arrived, he looked taller than Ethan remembered, broader too. A teenager on the edge of manhood, with Caroline's eyes but Ethan's jawline. He wore a warrior's hoodie and kept his hands shoved in his pockets. You actually came, Mason muttered. I told you I would, Ethan said softly. They walked inside, awkward at first, like strangers forced together. But as the game began, Mason's excitement slipped through. He shouted at the plays, laughed at the crowd, even explained stats to Ethan like a teacher to a student. Ethan didn't pretend to know more than he did. He just listened, letting his son's voice wash over him. For the first time in years, Mason looked at him not with anger, but with something closer to curiosity. By the end of the night, as they walked back to the car, Mason said, almost reluctantly, "It was good." "Thanks." Ethan's chest warmed. "Anytime." But the story didn't end there. The night after the game, Ethan's phone rang. An unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him pick up. "Hello." "Hi, lonely man." His heart skipped. "Lila." She giggled. "You remembered." He sank onto his couch, a smile tugging at his lips. "Of course I did. How are you?" "I'm good. Mommy says I shouldn't talk to strangers." "But you didn't feel like a stranger." Ethan's throat tightened. "I'm glad you called, Lila. I did what you said." "What did I say?" "You told me to call my son. Before it was too late." "And I did." There was a pause, then a delighted squeal. "Yay, see, I told you it would help." He chuckled softly, wiping at his eyes. "You were right. Are you still lonely?" she asked. He thought about Mason, about the game, about the way his son's eyes had softened, if only for a little. "Not as much," he said honestly. "That's good," Lila said. "Then I did my job." "What job?" he asked, smiling. "Making people happy," she said simply. "That's what I want to do when I grow up." The line clicked, and just like before, her mother's voice cut in. "Lila, who are you talking to?" There was a shuffle, then silence. The call ended. Ethan sat back, stunned. Whoever Lila was, wherever she came from, she had somehow stepped into his life at the exact moment he needed her. Weeks passed. Ethan and Mason started seeing each other more often, games, dinners, even a weekend trip. The conversations weren't always easy. Sometimes Mason stayed silent, other times he let years of anger spill out. Ethan took it all, never defending himself, only listening, apologizing when he should, promising less and showing up more. And through it all, he waited for another call from Lila. Sometimes it came, sometimes weeks went by in silence. But whenever her little voice slipped through the receiver, it reminded him to keep going. One night, months later, Mason sat across from him at a diner. They had just finished burgers, and Mason was scrolling through his phone. "Hey, Dad," Mason said suddenly. The word Dad nearly knocked the air from Ethan's chest. "Yeah," he managed. "You're different. Like, you're actually trying. I don't know why, but I kinda like it." Ethan swallowed hard. "I like it too." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Mason added, maybe you could come to my game next week." "I'm starting." Ethan nodded quickly. "I'll be there." Later that night, back in his penthouse, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown number again. She doesn't know I'm doing this. But thank you for listening to my daughter that night. She talks about you sometimes. Whoever you are, you helped her too." Ethan stared at the message, his throat tightening. He typed back, "No. She helped me." And as he set his phone down, he realized something that made him smile through the tears. A billionaire, a stranger, and a little girl had crossed paths by accident. But maybe it hadn't been an accident at all. Because sometimes, the wrong number is the call you were meant to answer.